Good morning, everybody. Jack Dallas here. I just wanted to sort of continue forming my timeline, if you will, of the path to war here being led by the Western propaganda media outlets. And I know this is a topic that I've sort of been continuously covering, but what I really am aiming to do here, as I said, is sort of form a timeline for you so that if you were to go back and watch my videos, or if you were to be watching them sort of in real time now, you can see how we are being propagandized and led to war in a very sort of seamless fashion. So I'm going to go ahead and provide some articles for you guys, and you can let me know what you think and write in, and maybe we can have more of a discussion about it. But first of all, starting off in Reuters here, we're talking about Turkey's reaction to the Russian jets being shot down by their military. So the headline here, Turkey's Erdogan says he does not want conflict and escalation after the Russian jet being downed. Interesting statement if I come down here. We heard Russia saying, making the statement yesterday that Turkey was, the accomplice of terrorists and all that, a stab in the back. What I find interesting is if you come here right to the first paragraph, what is Turkey saying about the attack? It had simply acted to defend its own security and the, quote, rights of our brothers, end quote, in Syria. Well, this is interesting for a couple of reasons, guys. Number one, if we listen to the sort of Western response to this attack, the first thing we were told was that the Russian jet came into Turkish airspace, the Turks felt threatened, and that's why the jet was brought down. We were not told that it was because they were defending the rights of their brothers in Syria. Syria is a different country, which Turkey really should have nothing to do with, despite the fact that we all know that they're one of the many groups funding and helping ISIS out. Now, at the same time, it should be quite glaringly obvious to anybody watching this video that when they talk about the rights of their brothers, the brothers that they're talking about, that's ISIS, guys. Turkey is one of the countries that originally helped to arm and fund and train ISIS. One of their biggest contributions was allowing ISIS fighters who had been trained by the West to use the Turkish border to get into northern Syria. So by allowing supplies to flow, by allowing, troops to flow, that's how Turkey was able to help out a lot. So here's Turkey directly basically coming out, saying we're defending the rights of our brothers. And they are referring to ISIS, guys. They are referring to the anti-Assad regime. It is quite simple. They're just using, they're parsing words to do it. So if I move on, I do have several articles here, as you can see, but perhaps the most egregious article in terms of propaganda that I came across this morning was this Wall Street Journal article, guys. And it's almost every paragraph, so I'm going to try to keep this quick. If I start here right in the beginning, when Turkey destroyed a Russian warplane, it had warned away from its airspace. So again, falling right in line, right off the bat, first sentence with the Western propaganda, sort of line here, warning away. So it makes it look like Turkey had nothing to do with it, even though we have no idea, I guess, officially what really happened. But I highly doubt that any kind of Russian warplane was well within, Turkish borders. And there's some other sort of hypocrisy, which we're going to get to later in this whole conflict. But the idea is that if Turkey honestly felt that they were threatened by Russia in some kind of combat sense, I think that you would have to find that to be kind of an unrealistic threat to be legitimately worried about. And at the same time, their provocation is so clearly more dangerous than what Russia was doing that, in my opinion, it's not only irresponsible, but just quite insane for them to have shot down these planes. And at the same time, now we're being told they were warned away and all this stuff. So basically, it immediately puts in the mind of the audience, those reading this article that, hey, Turkey, the West, hey, we tried. We tried to get them to turn around and they didn't. It's all part of framing the argument. They're sort of getting you ready to have an opinion before you've even formed one. So if I come down here, aggravating the conflict was a war of words. Okay, let me just pause there, guys. As if the conflict wasn't aggravated when Turkey shot down 2 goddamn jets, okay? But no, Putin's words is what's really causing the problem here, right, guys? Anyway, moving on. Leveling charges that Turkey, an ally of the US and France, finances terrorism. Accusations widely aired on Russian television in a day-long propaganda blitz. Now, guys, I'm sure I could probably sit here for a while and discuss this, but this should be pretty obvious. talking about Russian television again, they refer to, and I'm not clearing RT. I use their articles sometimes, but I'm well aware of the fact that they have been co-opted by the Russian government. I'm not saying that they're not, but again, it's pretty rich for the Wall Street Journal to be calling out the propaganda of other nations and not calling themselves out for what they are, which is a Western and specifically American propaganda outlet aimed at, the traditional right. That's their job. That's their function. It's that simple. So to be calling what RT is reporting a propaganda blitz, I mean, it's the pot calling the kettle black, guys, because everything you read in a major outlet is pretty much 99% propaganda. It just depends on what side they're batting for. So again, the pot calling the kettle black when the Wall Street Journal is talking about a propaganda blitz. And secondly, last time I checked, ISIS was a terrorist group, and Turkey did finance them, did allow their soldiers over the border, did help to fund, arm, and train them, and is not stopping their movements whatsoever now that a broader conflict is evolving. So yes, I would say that Turkey finances and does a lot more to assist in terrorism. That's not propaganda. That's pretty much a proven fact at this point, and we all know it. So not only is, the Wall Street Journal trying to kind of twist the truth by referring to RT's use of, this conflict as a propaganda blitz, but they're outright lying by essentially trying to make it look like, these claims are sort of wild, irresponsible claims on the part of Putin, when we know that Turkey was arming and funding ISIS, and we know that they're still arming and funding ISIS. They are financing terrorism. They are terrorists. The Turkish government is a terrorist group. Erdogan is a terrorist financier and supporter. It's that simple. So to be calling this, anything other than what it is, to me, I'm surprised that people even get away with this anymore, because everybody, I think, is waking up to the fact that America is ISIS. So this video here from the RT clip that I've pulled up, I found it interesting, calling out some of the, sort of, I guess, what you would call propaganda for what it is, and also some of the hypocrisy. Let's take a listen, guys.
In 2012, Syria shut down a Turkish plane that reportedly strayed into its territory. Prime Minister Erdogan then said a short-term border violation can never be a pretext for an attack. Meanwhile, NATO has expressed its condemnation of Syria's attack, as well as strong support for Turkey. Do you see the inconsistency of NATO's response on this?
As to what President Erdogan may have said after that incident, I would refer you to him. We had, again...
NATO's condemnation of Syria's attack. The U.S. is part of NATO, so...
What we're talking about today, we said we're still gathering the facts. We're not ready to make a determination that it is part of what happens when you have another power operating on the border of the country, again, carrying out airstrikes that aren't part of the broader coalition effort.
Wow, guys, a lot of stuff going on there. Number one, I guess I would point out the fact that it's pretty rich for the State Department to be talking about Russia not joining a broader effort, when what that simply means to them is that Russia is actually bombing ISIS and America is actually supporting ISIS, and so therefore Russia is bombing the wrong terrorists, or Russia is inconveniently fighting the actual war. When America talks about Russia not joining the broader coalition, what they mean is that Russia is fighting the terrorists, which America has financed and created, which is exacting out their foreign policy for them. So when you have terrorists like ISIS, who were funded, armed, and trained by America, going out there and trying to effect political changes by overthrowing the Assad regime, if Russia comes out and starts bombing them and going to war with them, America is going to come out and try to change the story and say that Russia is not joining the broader coalition, when in fact Russia is actually doing what America claims it was doing all along. I mean, everybody has to remember that America was engaged in airstrikes for a pretty long time before Russia, and Russia came in and made a difference in this conflict within just a couple days. So it kind of shows you what America's true aim was. Now, I don't want to, clear them entirely here, but I definitely want to point out the fact that, again, I think that reporter made a good point, pointing out Turkey's sort of hypocrisy on the issue. They had done essentially the same thing to Syria. And at the same time, again, just trying to make it look like Russia's not joining the broader coalition, blah, blah, blah. The point is, Russia is fighting the fight that America claims it's fighting. It's just that they're killing the American terrorists, the terrorists that America favors, so it's inconvenient for them, and it's not exacting their foreign policy goals. So moving on to Britain here. This is interesting. It's funny how this story, if you go to a lot of the British press, it's not really front and center right now. I guess that's kind of the point. But we've got William Hague, the leader of the British House of Commons, which, as you remember, we saw. I guess it was a year or two ago, the video of Cameron trying to get the House of Commons to go to war in Syria, and they were all against it. And now we've got William Hague saying, don't rule out boots on the ground, our favorite phrase. And, basically just getting the British ready to make it look inevitable, just like the French after the Paris attacks, because one of the main points I want to make, guys, and I think this is important, is that nowadays within global conflict, when you're trying to sell a war to your people, you don't necessarily have to actually sell the majority of the public on it. You simply have to make the war look inevitable. This was easier, I think, in times past. World War I, World War II, a lot of propaganda, but also the conflicts were such that governments were able to frame the events on the ground in such a way that it was easy to get their countries involved through a couple simple false flags. At the same time, nowadays, just because of the way things are going and because people are wary of conflict after Iraq and Afghanistan, again, they're not trying to get their public to approve of the conflict. They are simply trying to sort of envelop them in it. They're trying to make it seem inevitable. So while they don't want to go to war, if there's false flag attacks happening, if there's things like the Paris attack happening, if it looks like other countries are joining the conflict, they simply make it look like it's unavoidable. And from there, they don't have to justify it because people just kind of shake their heads and say that's the way things go, kind of like we did after 9/11. After 9/11, nobody really, I don't think anybody was surprised. I mean, we had the biggest protests against war in the history of the world. Didn't change anything. Goes to show that you don't necessarily have to convince people to support the war. You just have to make it seem inevitable. And I think a post 9/11 mindset is what they're trying to accomplish here. So I bring up the New York Times homepage just to kind of show people oftentimes what the propaganda of the day or the story of the day is. And they're certainly ratcheting up the tension on, this downing of this jet. Number one, tension with Russia built up before Turkey's downing of jet, all this stuff. So we've got, we're talking about that topic. But not only that, we've got right here the origins of jihadist-inspired attacks in the U.S. So again, just completely leveling the whole blame on, Islamic terrorism. No talk of possible false flag action. No talk of other, potential factors of why there's global conflict. We're not talking about pipelines. We're not talking about military treaties. We're not talking about trying to get the EU from under the thumb of Russia for natural gas imports. No, everything is jihadism, everything is Islam, and everything is whatever the U.S. says it is. At the same time, we've got the editorial board, which might as well be called the war board of the New York Times, because as much as they pretend to be a bunch of liberals, that's all they want is war. And we've got, talking about, uncertainty, another word that people use to make them think they're going to go to war, and the already complicated Syrian Civil War. The most complicated part of the Syrian Civil War, guys, is the fact that the U.S. basically started it. And what we need to be doing is pointing out these truths to people so that they see the way that conflicts are playing out. All right? So moving on to that main article that was in the New York Times there, right on the front page, NATO-Russia tensions rise after Turkey downs jet. Obviously some discrepancies in what, how this story played out and what was really going on, guys. I'd like to see what the truth is. My biggest concern is it's going to be another, sort of just media debacle, I guess we'll say, where, one country says this, one country says this. It's going to be like MH17 all over again, and nobody's going to know what happened, and everybody's going to be coming out saying different things. The fact of the matter is, I think what it comes down to is there is just no way, you can't sell me on this. There is no way that Turkey felt legitimately threatened by Russia. And even if they did, again, this is the kind of thing that they would want. It's a natural provocation. If Russia sent two jets into Turkey, and those two jets were to commit attacks within Turkish airspace, that's like solid gold for Western governments, guys. That's the ultimate. That's like a false flag without a false flag. So that's the ultimate provocation that would get them to be able to have a war. So when you see this, you've got to try to look at events like this through the lens of the people at the top, because you've got to see what are the benefits. Ask yourself who benefits from these conflicts. And again, just like with the chemical attacks in Syria, the people that are on, the side of Assad don't really benefit from these things. Does Russia really benefit if it attacks Turkey within its own border? No. In fact, as I said, that gives tons of justification to every Western nation to not only go after Russia, but to step it up, in Syria, to step it up against Russia's foreign policy goals. So at the end of the day, you have to say, one, Russia is not dumb enough to just attack Turkey. And number two, Turkey would love for Russia to attack them. So you've got a few conflicting factors showing that Turkey's quote-unquote concern for their, national security and national sovereignty, to me, is just an excuse. And the fact that they shot down this plane, guys, I mean, that's cowboy politics. That's just irresponsible, ridiculous, egregious action. I mean, I think Russia is actually showing tremendous restraint, to be honest with you, because could you imagine if anybody did this, the reverse to America, to one of their countries? If one of these French jets, got shot down by, some other country after the Paris attacks, I mean, they'd have all the justification they need for war. So I think it just goes to show that if you think about it for 2 seconds, you can see that none of this stuff really benefits Russia, and so we're sort of being led down the wrong path, guys. It's just all deception. It's all sleight of hand, and we've got to realize that. I'm going to finish up here with a bit of strong propaganda from the Telegraph. The Russians had it coming to them. Now that the Turks have shot down a Russian airplane, Mr. Putin might finally understand that if you play with fire, you end up getting burned. Wow. Just wow, guys. So let me get this straight, Telegraph. If you play with ISIS, if you arm, fund, and train and create ISIS, is that playing with fire? Because your government, that's right, the British government, is just as complicit in this as the US and as every other Western nation. It's their dollars flowing in there, it's their foreign policy goals being exacted, and it's their governments that are doing all of the controlling behind the scenes of this conflict. None of these groups in their fighting, none of these Islamic terrorist groups in their fighting, do not have some kind of puppet master at the top directing their actions. And at the end of the day, for the UK to come out and say that Putin is playing with fire, the Russians are playing with fire, the West started this conflict, the West is ISIS, and the West is not fighting the fight that they claim they're fighting. They're fighting a proxy war to exact foreign policy goals, and innocent civilians and their own countries are the victims of these psychopaths' endless goals and endless warmongering. And this is the kind of propaganda that leads to war. And I just want to show people that we're back to 2003, right before war was declared in Iraq, and we have a chance to stop this. It's just like 2003. The propaganda is right at that peak point, guys. So ask yourself, if you're going to accuse Russia of playing with fire, who started the fire, guys? I think it was the people who armed, funded, and trained ISIS, namely the West. So guys, let's talk soon.